Okay, the final piece of the web that we want to talk about is something called JavaScript. So far, everything we've talked about is for static web pages. Sure, you can put images on your website, and you can put text on your website, but that's all static. Once you get the data, that's the data you get, and you can't interact with it in any meaningful way. But we know that when you're on the internet, you often can interact with the website in interesting ways. For example, this website is Google Slides, and I can do some interesting things to it, like when I click the arrow buttons, I can go between slides, and if I type text, it will cause the website to change. And for example, if you go play a game in your web browser, well then you're causing the website to change in response to things that you are doing. And the way that we make that happen is a language called JavaScript. So it's a programming language that the web browser runs to make the website do interesting things. Now, a very important part of JavaScript is that the code that you run is run on the browser, not on the server. That's very important for our attacks later. So the way that you use JavaScript is you send a request and you say, I want to download this URL. And the server says, sure, here's the URL that you requested. Here's a bunch of data. Here's HTML. Here's CSS. And also, here's some JavaScript. Now, the server says, I'm not going to run this JavaScript for you. That's not my problem. That's your problem. And the browser is the one that is responsible for running that JavaScript and causing interesting things to happen. So for example, if I open up an online game and I start playing and I click all the arrow buttons and the little creature moves up and down, that's JavaScript on my computer causing all of that interesting stuff to happen. It's not code on the server. The server is just responsible for taking a piece of code, sending you the code and saying, sure, here's a JavaScript file, and then your browser has to run the code. And this is going to be very important, again, when we talk about attacks, because we have to remember that JavaScript runs not on the server, but on the browser. Now again, modern internet sometimes changes this rule, but for this class, JavaScript is client-side unless otherwise specified. So what's good about JavaScript? It lets you change this HTML or the CSS. So for example, I could write JavaScript that says, if you click this button, the page is going to turn from blue to red. And then when you click the button, your browser runs some code to change the HTML so that it goes from a blue background to a red background. That's something you could do using JavaScript, and that's how your websites become interactive. Now, JavaScript can just be directly embedded in HTML. So for example, if you want to write some HTML and you just want the JavaScript inline, you can just enclose the JavaScript in script tags, and that causes the browser to run whatever JavaScript lives inside of those tags. So you can directly write it in your HTML if you want. That's something you can do. And basically all modern web pages I can think of use JavaScript in some form, even if you don't know it. So for example, maybe there's like a tracking script that checks what you're doing and sends analytics back to the server. That would be running in JavaScript. Or if you open a page that's interactive and it has all these features, like you can click on a button and a login box appears, that's something that would also be written in JavaScript. So JavaScript is what makes the modern internet interactive, where you can click on things and cause interesting things to happen. That being said, we are not a JavaScript class, so we're not going to quiz you on what JavaScript looks like or how to write it, but there are some common functions we'll see when we talk about attacks using JavaScript. So we'll do a quick speed run on what those functions look like. I guess before we do that, if you really want to learn JavaScript, we've written up some quick facts about it, but it's not that important for this class. But those are some common facts about JavaScript. One thing that's kind of interesting is that you can interpret it. So it's kind of like Python, where you just interpret the code as it's written. You don't have to compile it. And there's something called just-in-time compiling that makes that possible, but out of scope for our class. And something else that's a little bit interesting if you ever go and design a web browser. So if you ever go work for Google Chrome or Mozilla Firefox, you have to write the JavaScript interpreter JavaScript is a memory-safe language, but if you mess up writing the interpreter, you might cause some bugs. So this is a slide that's only relevant if you go develop Google Chrome, but for the rest of us, we can just assume that our browsers are running safe code in a sandbox. And what that means, if you remember sandboxes, is that the code runs in your browser, and even if you download malicious code, it can't break out of your browser and affect the rest of your computer.